These northern Danes, Jutes, Angles and Saxons were warlike and aggressive peoples who fought not only on land, but used the sea for piracy and raiding. Bravery in combat was greatly honoured. A raid into the country of Frisia, now remembered chiefly for its Frisian cattle, provides historic data in Beowulf's story. Such warfare bred fierce tribes capable of defeating Roman legions. To inhabitants of gentler southern lands, this was an alien world beyond civilization's pale, whose people were barbarians. An 11th century chronicler would record, "And while the whole land of Germany is frightful with thick forests, Jutland is still more frightful, where the land is shunned on account of the poverty of its produce, and the sea on account of the infestation of pirates. Cultivation is found hardly anywhere. Hardly any place exists suitable for human habitation. But wherever there are arms of the sea, the country has large settlements." Such impressions long remained. As late as the 20th century, author Alistair MacLean would describe parts of these lands as the hell of our ancient northern European ancestors, of the Vikings, the Danes, the Jutes, of Beowulf and the monster-haunted meres, the hell of eternal cold. Beowulf and his companions arrived safely in Zealand, where formerly King Hrothgar's great mead hall had been one where goblets had passed among seasoned warriors flushed with beer, who pledged themselves to protect Heorot. For this building was so wondrous as to be given a name. But Heorot had been abandoned, and no warriors feasted and drank within what had become a place of terror. Grendel, a great troll-like monster of lake and forest, angered by the singing of Hrothgar's warriors, had attacked the hall, killing and devouring its occupants, so none now dared enter. But Beowulf did not fear such creatures, and with the king's permission, he and his companions went into the hall to eat and rest. During the black night, in off the moors, down through the mist bands, Grendel came loping, entering the mead hall to kill and eat one of its sleeping warriors. Beowulf was not asleep, and rising, wrestled so mightily with the monster that Heorot's thick timber walls shook and trembled before he tore off Grendel's arm, causing the creature to run away and die. Great were celebrations, feasting, poetry and song that followed. Wondrous the gifts King Hrothgar heaped upon Beowulf, although unbeknown to all, the peril had not yet ended, but increased. Grendel's mother, monstrous hell-bride brooding on her wrongs, entered Heorot in furious, vengeful rage, seeking victims. Tearing down her son's severed arm from where it had been nailed as trophy, she seized and ate one of the Danes' greatest fighting men before retiring to a home at the bottom of a blood-stained lake. Asleep in a neighbouring hall, Beowulf woke to discover the monster had returned back to her dread abode, slaughtering all who dared follow. But Beowulf was unafraid, and armoured with a fine coat of chain mail, dived into the lake, swimming down to kill the evil creature in a cavern deep below its monster-infested waters. Greatly honoured yet again by Hrothgar, and laden with gold and precious gifts, Beowulf's return to Sweden ends the first section of his saga. This Beowulf epic was probably typical of those told in Germanic royal halls, especially during winter, when howling gales or steadily falling snow made raiding and warfare impossible. Warriors would feast and drink, listening to stories of great bravery against enemies, or even monsters like those the mighty Beowulf had confronted and killed. Northern tribes had defeated and destroyed two powerful Roman legions. And when Britain was abandoned by Rome in the 5th century, Jute, Angle and Saxon increased their raiding against its now defenceless peoples. Long ships grounding on undefended British beaches brought with them a bloodlust that caused great suffering to coastal dwelling peoples. But raiding led to migration and settlement, and soon much of southeastern England was in the hands of peoples European chroniclers would name Anglo-Saxon. Like Beowulf, these warriors often wore chainmail, bearing axe, spear, or sea-axe, the short sword that gave Saxons their name. And like their hero, few could withstand them. Much of Roman Britain, occupied by Beowulf's pagan peoples, had already converted to Christianity. But it seems only more westerly British regions retained their faith, and so it's recorded, held great hatred for these newcomers with their old gods and evil ways. Possibly this was reason why Rome's Pope Gregory dispatched St. Augustine to England in AD 597, where, after landing at Ebbsfleet, Kent, he would convert its King Ethelbert and many of his people. Augustine built his first church at Canterbury, not the great stone edifice of today, but a relatively simple wooden structure that reflected his new convert's timber building tradition. Canterbury Cathedral now stands upon this site, and from its cathedra, or bishop's throne, spread church organization and influence that would soon greatly affect the whole country. Yet this was not modern Christianity with its 2,000 years of evolution, but one developing out of paganism, often with bloodshed, since the old gods had powerful followers.
The poem as a whole, it provides such a very good response to a question, a rhetorical question, which a hardline bishop called Alcuin famously asks in a letter which he has written to the monks, the abbot of an abbey, not quite sure which one, where the monks have been listening to heroic poetry in their refectories instead of the Gospels. And Alcuin tells them off for this and asks the rhetorical question, what has the hero Ingeld to do with Christ? And in Beowulf we have references to this very hero Ingeld.
At Bury St Edmunds in East Anglia, Siegbert, its first Christian Anglo-Saxon king, founded a religious community, only to be challenged by Mercia's pagan king Penda, who hated the new faith. Siegbert would be killed in battle, seemingly bearing no weapons, for he had become a man of peace, and it may be his body was carried here for burial. Yet Christianity would continue to extend its influence. King Edmund, also a Christian, was certainly buried here in AD 869 after being murdered by Danes, although Bury has nothing to do with his interment, being derived from the Saxon burra, or fortified settlement. So many events considered miraculous occurred before and after Edmund's burial. He became a saint.